Okay, well, welcome back to another Thursday frequency. Topic today is Helix 5, and Helix 5 is really just an internal name for a new architectural revision that we have for Edge delivery services in Adobe Experience Manager sites as a cloud service with document-based editing. And we've been talking about this a week ago on Tuesday. So some of you might have seen the recording. For some of you, this might be completely new. And the main reason we've scheduled this twice was to make sure that we have enough coverage for people from the US and North America who, well, often can't make the Tuesdays due to time zone issues. And on top of that, I think this time we can be on the one hand a bit more hands-on, and I know that some of you actually already have been trying the new configuration and the new origins. So I'm expecting a bit of questions and discussion here. And as always, if you're new here, welcome to the community. The way this works is there's this is mostly meant to be a discussion format. So if you want to, and we would like you to participate, if you want to participate, please turn on your camera so that we can see you. This makes it much better for everyone. And if at any time you have questions, feel free to interrupt and ask. There's no speaker slots here. So
Yeah, you can also
yep.
put them into the chat. Yeah.
You can also put
So
them into the chat, exactly. And the thing is, I'm recording, so I'm not. I see that there's something going on in the chat, but I'm not reading it, which means
I will
that
check.
you will get Dominik to read your questions for you. So that's another option we have here. Okay. So what's new and what's Helix 5? And as you know, Edge delivery services in Adobe Experience Manager sites as a cloud service with document-based editing has been undergoing quite some development, and it originally started as Project Helix, and the engineering team has grown attached to that little code name. And well, who can blame them, given that Helix is only as many letters as the new name is now as now words. Um, so we decided to basically use Helix 5 as the code name for the next version of the architecture, and that is something that we've been working on for almost a year. So we started first work on this in last August, and it was mainly meant to address some of the operational and maintenance challenges that we are dealing with, and out of that we've gotten a couple of new features, but due to the way how we've been building this, the features are more or less secondary, and the features might appear a bit esoteric, or overly technical. But if I know my audience, esoteric and overly technical is exactly what you're looking for. So so I hope I can offer you some red meat here. So let's get started with the first visible change. The first visible change is that you've been using two main domains to access Edge delivery services. You've been using hlx.live and hlx.page. hlx.page in order to preview content for your authors, and hlx.live was the origin that you would point your CDN to serve the content. And that is something that we are changing, and we are changing it to aem.page and aem.live, and that is essentially following a branding, let's call it branding cleanup, that we've been doing for the past 2 years. Right, the first thing that had to go was the Helix up command line. Next thing that went was that www.helix.live became www.aem.live, and now the same thing is happening for the domains that your authors are seeing with aem.page, and it's also happening for the domain that your CDN is seeing with aem-live. And a part of this change is that there's actually an actual change in the CDN implementation. So if you go to, and you can actually do this right now, because that's another change from last week. Last week we were in a mode where you basically had to tell us to enable aem-live for you, and we would then allow list your repository or your GitHub organization, and we no longer do this. You're all allow listed, so you can just take your existing main repo owner.hlx.page and open it on aem.page. So that's the first change from for anyone who's seen the recording and from last week. And Ina, are we going to do this later on and look at your site on aem.page?
Yeah, sure.
Great. Okay, perfect. So we're going to look at this live. The other thing is, and this is kind of important, is that the actual CDN implementation behind aem.page and helix.page has changed significantly. And the biggest secondary advantage for you is that aem.page is now caching, which means your authors are getting a bit faster experience, and you've been seeing this sometimes, right, when you've been building pull requests, and Lighthouse score was at 99, and you were thinking, what can I do to get to the last what can I do to get to the last one missing point in order to get to the clear 100? You know that the old trick was to change in the test URL hlx.page with hlx.live, because that was cached and would give you a couple more milliseconds. The bad news is this trick doesn't work anymore. The good news is aem.page is now always as fast as aem.live, which is a good thing. The other part of this is that underneath we've changed the way how we are organizing our CDN services. So we used to have helix.live and helix.page were different CDN services, where helix.live was a relatively simple but caching service, and aem.page was a definitely super complicated and non-caching service. And now both of these are caching and more complicated than helix.live was, but still not as complicated as helix.page was. And instead we are breaking down the core functionality, for instance, for RAM or for the pipeline or for code delivery or for media delivery into individual smaller CDN services, which makes this entire setup much more traceable for us as an engineering and operations team, and also helps us roll out new features. One of the things, and that also means that you will, or that you might notice slight differences in how aem.live and aem.page are behaving, right? And this means if you are expecting any of this kind of, if you're experiencing any of this unexpected behavior, please let us know, because unexpected behavior are often interesting bugs that we want to deal with. And we had an interesting issue with this just this week, where one of our customers was reporting that they've been getting error 404 on a sitemap XML when accessing it through Cloudflare. And the funny thing of this was that this didn't happen when you went straight to aem.live. right? Sitemap was fine, but it was sometimes broken on Cloudflare. And it turned out that there were two issues here. Issue number one was that they had a crawler or some bot that was making GET requests with a body. And if you read the HTTP spec, it's saying GET requests cannot have a body. So what we do when we see a GET request with a body is that we just reject it. We sent an error 400, right, telling you stop doing this. It's not a good idea. And what Cloudflare did on top of that was that Cloudflare on the one hand didn't do this sanitation, right? It didn't consistently reject it, but it led it through to us, and then it did some cache poisoning. So it cached the error, and that was interesting to trace down, and it was something that only happened on aem.live and not helix.live. So this is why we're rolling this out step by step, and this is why we want to have this feedback channel while we're rolling it out. So, as always with new software, surprises are to be expected, and we want to hear from you when that happens. There's another piece in that architecture diagram at the CDN level, and this is what we call config.aem.page, and this is a new service, which is a new architectural component, which we call the config service. And the config service has two parts. One part that is working unrestricted already, because it's super baked into the delivery architecture, which is the config.aem.page service, which basically centralizes access to all configuration options. And when you look at how a site was organized in the past, you had some configuration was part of your GitHub repository, right? You had, for instance, your fstab.yaml or your sitemap configuration. You had other parts that were part of your content repository sitting in the .helix folder, right? Like, for instance, your headers configuration, and this meant that when we had to access this configuration, for instance, in order to render a page or to deliver content, we had to access it in the right place, and not always was that easily accessible. And the most important part of this was, for instance, when you set headers, these headers would apply to things that were delivered through the pipeline, but that would not apply to things that were delivered bypassing the pipeline. So the best example of this is setting a header in headers in the header spreadsheet would not apply to media being served on helix.page and on helix.live, and it's now applying to everything on aem.live, which esoteric, overly technical, but really useful for some of our customers, for some of our users, because you can now have a more consistent header configuration. Another part that this config service enables us to do is to have a much better way of dealing with multi-site and especially with configuration inheritance. So over the course of the last year, we actually introduced the ability. Actually, that was about a year ago. We introduced the ability for one site to inherit certain configuration properties from another one, right? Which would allow you to centralize certain configuration, especially if you were running a dozen or more sites on edge delivery services. And with the new config service, this is way more accessible, and this is basically baked in, so that we can have this kind of configuration inheritance and multi-site configuration for a lot of sites in a much more accessible and much more maintainable way, I would say. And probably the biggest piece of configuration that is going to be enabled by this is what we call repo-less. And if you've been in the tech community for a while, and you've been listening to what tech marketers say and what technologists say about this, you know that whenever you hear less, It means that the thing that is less, it's actually still there, right? So serverless still has servers, repoless still has repos. In our case, this means you don't have to have one repository, one Git repository for every single site that you're running on aem-live anymore. But instead, you can create a new site on aem-live, which is pointing to an existing repository. And this is especially useful if you're dealing with multi-site setups, right? Let's say you're a car manufacturer and you're running variants of your site in a lot of different markets, and the only thing that is really different is the content. Then you no longer have to create a car manufacturers -de, car manufacturer -UK, car manufacturer US variant of your repository where you have to copy code around, but you can simply create these sites, point them all to car manufacturer -template, and it's going to pick up the code from there, which also means you can make code changes in one place and then roll it out to a lot of sites in one go, which for a smaller part of our customer base that is running a larger part of our sites, this is a really attractive way to deal with large configurations. So this is what we call repoless. The repoless setup, of course, there's still repos, but you can go with an existing one. For instance, right, you could go, if you think the aem boilerplate is not just the most fantastic example of minimalism in web design, but it's the most fantastic example of web design ever, then you could absolutely go live with the boilerplate version of the site, and you just have to bring your content. So that's repoless, and it's enabled by the config bus. And let me think. The farther we go down the list, the more esoteric the features become, and the harder I have to think about them. So the next change that is coming with aem-live is the introduction of before I talk about this, of course there will be an admin API for managing configurations. This admin API is still very much in the works, so that you basically need to ping us, and then you get an API key, and then you can call the API. If you are not faint of heart, please let us know. We give you an API key and allow you to play around with it. But of course, you can use all of the aem-live features without having to do that, because it's essentially a drop-in replacement to your Helix Live site. And so the next topic is authenticated sites. And if you've been running, and again, this is only a smaller fraction of our customer base, but it's the kind of fraction that brings a lot of traffic to us, so that's why we care. And if you're running an authenticated site, right, or if you're making sure that you don't want anyone to access your aem.live and aem.page by accessing it directly, then we used to have a setup that would basically require you to set up an IDP authentication with Microsoft. So our CDN would authenticate against essentially your SharePoint, but behind the scenes against your Active Directory, and maybe even against your single sign-on provider. And only when Microsoft would say, yeah, this user is valid, that's when we would show the content. And admin operations were limited in a similar way. So publishing and previewing were limited by the list of people who are on that spreadsheet. So the challenge with this is that if you want to serve your site, your CDN still needs to authenticate against helix.live. And the way we've been handling this in the past was that we would create a JWT token. So JWT token is a case of REST syndrome. JWT token is Akram. Do you remember what JWT stands for? It's something J web token, and I would think
JSON
it's
JSON
JSON.
web.
It's JSON web token. Perfect. Thank you. Um, so and the problem with generating these JSON web tokens was that on the one hand you had to talk to us, on the other hand that these JSON web tokens would be valid only for 1 year, which means you not just had to talk to us, but you had to talk to us on a yearly basis. And so we've been looking for ways to improve this, and the way we found this is to use MTLS, which is mutual TLS, or known by its street name, client certificates. And client certificates are typically something that you see in the authentication of browser to server or browser to CDN. And on top of that, right, and the way client certificates work is that it's an extension of the normal TLS or HTTPS protocol, where it's not just that the server presents a certificate so that the client can identify that it's the right server, but also the server requires the client to present a certificate so that the server can validate that the client is who they say they are. And fortunately, all CDNs that we're dealing with support client certificates, not just, or support MTLS, mutual TLS, not just to authenticate visitors, but you can also use mutual TLS to authenticate against your origin. Right? So in this case, your origin would be aem.live, and you would present the client certificate to aem.live to prove that you are really, hey, I'm really example.com, and I'm able, and I want now I want to see my main -- example site -- example.am.live content. And by presenting a client certificate to us, we can then validate that it's really you or your CDN that is requesting the content and deliver it if the client certificate is valid. And this is relatively standard fare as far as it comes to client certificates. The big deviation and the big change that we do here is that in a typical setup, it's the server operator that is running a private certificate agency and that is issuing these client certificates, right? So you would basically have Adobe running a certificate agency that is able to run or able to hand out certificates that you can then stick into your CDN, so that your CDN is presenting them back to us, and we say, yeah, we trust that certificate agency, and we would be the only one in the world that trusts that certificate agency. The problem with this is that you still would need to talk to us, right? Because you need the client certificate from us, and because client certificates also want, for security reasons, an expiry period, you would still have to talk to us on a yearly basis, right? So the only thing that we would have switched is we would have switched the token format from JSON web tokens, basically small JSON snippets, to PEM files, which is not that convenient either. It's more secure, but it's not that convenient either. So what we're doing instead is that we're saying we're going to trust the public certificate agencies that your site is already using to create certificates to present to your visitors, and we are going to accept these certificates. So if you're using Let's Encrypt, if you're using Zero SSL, if you're using DigiCert in order to create certificates that your CDN is serving, we can then accept these certificates as proof that you are the CDN that is serving, let's say, example.com, and that it's about the example.com website and can give you access to this. And that's what I think is a really nice way of handling of handling secure access in a way that is nicely aligned with the key rotation best practices that you've already established in order to rotate the certificates that you're presenting to the client. So it's we are we're taking, and you know, if you've been working with edge delivery services, you know that we are really big on bring your own. So this is bring your own certificate and use it in a slightly unexpected way. But on the other hand, right, that's what certificates are for. So we've been talking about aem-live as a replacement for Helix Live, what the CDN changes mean. We've been talking about the new config bus, how this enables configuration inheritance, how this enables repo-less, and we've been talking about MTLS. And now I need to think really, really hard if this is all we've been talking about on Tuesday. And I think it is. There's one, and just because I'm seeing Ekram here on the call, there's one even tinier and even more esoteric change that is going to be enabled with Helix 5, which is that we are going to switch RAM from being third party to being first party. And so if you are into RAM, or if you are the luckiest 100th visitor to your own page, and you had the developer tools open, you might have seen you might have seen from time to time a stream of messages on the console saying ping top, ping lazy, ping LCP, ping view block, view media. This is what we call our real use monitoring, and it's a really lightweight analytical solution that we offer you for performance optimization, for understanding your site's traffic, and at the moment, this data is being sent to an endpoint which is rum.hlx.page, and rum.hlx.page is a really nice endpoint, but one problem that we have to deal with is that if your site is running a very strict cross-site, or is running a very strict CSP policy, a really strict content security policy, then it might not allow these outgoing requests to be made, and this has been causing a bit of issues for some of our customers. So we said, the best way of dealing with this is to move our RAM data collection from rum.hlx.page not to rum.aem.page, but instead to your domain /.rum, and that's where these requests are now going. And this change is something that is enabled through Helix 5, and it will essentially become effective as soon as you use the new boilerplate version that is using this new RAM collection script baked in. We don't have it right now. So even if you would switch to using Helix 5 right away, that would require a code change. And again, it affects only a very small number of customers, and only if you care about this very much, we recommend you to make the change manually. Typically, you can make the change from helix.live to aem-live without having to do code changes. And yeah, with that being said, I think that's all I wanted to tell you about. So and Ina has been listening to Tuesday's call and thinking, hey, can we try this? So
So before that,
Yeah.
one thing about the RAM data.
Right.
So maybe it should also be documented then that you should not use the RAM path on your own because it will be used by Adobe.
Yes.
Just
Good
as
point.
an idea.
Yeah.
Before people are confused that their content is not delivered anymore.
Yeah. Not a lot of people are delivering content from .ram. I know this because
No, slash RAM, not dot.
no,
But yes, it shouldn't. But if you're writing an article about RAM data on the root level, whatever, I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's /.ram, which is actually an illegal path.
.ram. Okay,
Yeah.
Yeah, then it's fine.
Yes.
I thought
Yeah.
it's slash RAM. Okay,
No,
sorry.
no, no.
Then
It's
good that we talked about it.
yes, yeah, and yeah, the thing with these with the URL space is that it seems unlimited, but you can still get collisions, right? So we're careful with this.
With the dot in front, it shouldn't happen.
Exactly.
Hopefully.
Yeah, mostly because most of the stuff that is going to dot something requests, right, like dot gitignore is something that we see in our CDN logs quite a bit, is not really visitor traffic. So we've already disabled it at the CDN level. So it's extremely unlikely that that you had something on there. But even if you have, there are workarounds, and we can deal with this.
And if it's .ram, I think it's really easy.
Okay. So, Ina, do you want to tell us about your site? And maybe share your screen.
And then we wanted to see how it looks with the Helix 5 version, no?
Yes.
Let me quickly open it or share the screen. If I find the proper button. This one looks good.
Looks good on my end too.
Great.
Okay. Ground fork.
So luckily I have Christina with me. She's one of the developers from the website.
Okay.
So she can also give you some details if you are interested. So website currently working. So I opened it on the Helix Live page. Links at the moment are always pointing to the live domain. So if we want to jump around, I always need to replace the domain. But yeah, page is on the original live domain working as expected. So what do you want to see now?
What happens if you replace the HLX in your URL with .am? With AM?
Let's see. Nothing. Everything works as expected.
Oh, that's perfect. Yeah. So that's exactly how exciting or how boring this should be. Right. So you change 3 letters in the URL, and the rest stays the same. And fortunately, nobody is sending GET requests with the body today. So so we yeah. So
also the sitemap.
Perfect. Yes.
Still works.
Yeah. And let's take a look at aem.page just to be sure.
Sitemap still works, and let's go to the homepage.
Yeah.
Also still works.
Perfect.
So
okay.
Looks nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's part one of the migration process that we suggest is go to your site, replace HLX with AEM. Step number 2, browse around on the site to make sure that nothing is broken, and nothing should be broken. So I get if this is more a perfunctory um, per control here. And then the last change is to set your CDN config, so that instead of pointing to AEM, instead of pointing to helix.live, you would point to aem.live. So
let's see if this also still works. Okay,
no,
this doesn't work anymore.
This doesn't work anymore. And actually, I have to. That's one of. Oh, you're one of the. Okay, so we have a. Let me explain the background on this. Now I know what I forgot to mention. So
Happy to remind you.
Well, thank you. We couldn't have done this better if we had rehearsed it. So one of the functionalities we had in on helix.live, which we don't have on aem.live anymore, is the ability to take in form posts. Right. So on helix.live, you could send a form post, and if you had a properly prepared spreadsheet in your Google Drive or in your SharePoint, we would append a row to this. And this functionality was used by a very, very small number of customers. And Ina, I'm sorry that you're one of them. And
we like to test things.
It's, yeah. And it's been, it's a, you like to test things is a good example of this, right? Because what we've seen is most customers and many of our customers have forms, right? The thing is, most of these customers, and by most I mean about 99% of them, send these forms to an existing Marketo or to an existing CRM or to some other forms processor, and this means the ability to take in form posts was adding a lot of complexity baggage on the one hand, had a couple of security implications that we rather not want to deal with, and therefore we decided not to have it in aem.live. And that means for Ina and the GroundFox side, we now need to look at ways to migrate that particular form. And there are a number of ways of dealing with this. One of the easiest one, especially Ina, what's your rough daily volume on that form in terms of form submissions?
That's not a lot. It's a contact form.
Right. So if you're getting, I would say if you're getting less than 10 form submissions per minute, then
I guess it's less.
yeah. The vast majority of the funny thing is the absolute vast majority of our customers are in that bucket, and we have one customer, adobe.com, where this is not the case. So in your scenario, and I think you're using Google Drive as the content storage, right? I've gathered that from the Google Drive tab you had opened. One of the easiest way to do this is to have essentially a small Google Drive application script that can take in the form post and replicates the same functionality. And I would ask you to ping us on your Slack channel so that we can set that up for you.
I will do it directly.
Perfect. So this is forms is one of the features that we are saying goodbye to, and as I mentioned, it's a very small number of customers that are really affected, even smaller number of traffic, and the interesting thing about this is the greatest share of use of this feature that we've seen is something that we would rather classify as misuse. Creative misuse, admittedly, that's still within that's still completely legal, but something that we would rather not want to see. So yeah, so that's saying goodbye to posts on aem-live. And Dominik, I think I mentioned that on Tuesday as well, right? So and we had it documented on the aem-live website for forms for a couple of months already. I realized that this reads a bit like the opening chapter of Hitchhiker's Guide Through the Galaxy, with the notice of destruction being posted in the sub-basement 3A for a couple of months, but we know this is why we do this slow and staged rollout of this feature. The biggest thing for you to know is you can try aem-live right now. We would rather want you to try it as soon as possible, so that you can find issues and tell us about this, and that we can address them. And we have both we have both our existing Slack channels and the Discord, of course, for this, as a viable way. And we'd like to hear your feedback. And I've been hearing feedback from some of you in private messages before, and my encouragement is always in Discord. Use the public channel so that other people can learn from it. And so
one feedback from me here, because I'm just literally trying this now with one of the project I have set up on Edge Delivery. Once you kick off the sidekick on the Google Drive, would that open automatically the page on aem.page, or do I need to make some adjustments to the sidekick options?
Yeah. So there are two ways of doing this at the moment. One is in the sidekick configuration. And if you post your Git URL in Discord, I can create a pull request for you. You can basically set the preview host and the publish host, and you would basically set the preview host and the publish host to aem.page. The second way of doing this, and the nice thing about this is that this is the reversible way of doing it. There's an irreversible way of doing this, which is to initialize a configuration. And if you have an initialized configuration, the sidekick knows that this is now a Helix 5 site and will stick to using aem-page and aem-live for previews and publishes. So these are the two ways of getting there. And for now we generally recommend the reversible way, but both ways are fine.
So reversible way is to send you basically the GitHub link, and you're gonna
and you don't. The thing is, you don't have to send. The first person has to send it to me so that I can make the pull request, and then we can point others to, hey, replicate the pull request. But it's
So you mean and changing it in tools sidekick library HTML?
Yeah, I think it was a JSON document that I edited. But
let me share my screen again.
Yeah.
So I would assume that it's this one.
Of course. Okay, so that's another point. So
sorry.
No,
because in the JSON there was nothing.
You mentioned
with Helix.
Right. You mentioned that you want to try all the things. So perfect. Could you open a new tab and open github.com/adobe/helix-homepage? We're going to look at our own stuff.
Helix Home.
Helix, no, sorry, Helix homepage. Helix website, sorry. I'm out of my mind.
No worries.
Okay. So that should be in tools. Sidekick. No. Wait.
Sorry.
You know what? I don't know, and I will put it into Discord. I think that's better anyway. So there are 2 lines to a JSON file that you need to change, and I can't find the JSON file right now. So I apologize. But the other thing that I quickly want to point out, because you are using this on the ground fork homepage. So
Yep.
if you're using Sidekick plugins, and if you're using Sidekick extensions and other extensions that are calling either helix.page or helix.live directly, right? Then these paths need to be adjusted. So one good way of doing this is to search in your Git repository for helix.page and helix.live, and adjust these references.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Lots of this.
So and
Okay.
Yeah.
So when do you think that the boilerplate is the boilerplate adjust? So when you create a new website from boilerplate, is that adjust out of the box?
Yeah. So it already works out of the. So we do have I think a 2.x branch already open for the boilerplate that you can try. But we don't have a timeline when we're going to switch it over, to be honest. Right? So
so that was my second question. When do you think that the Helix HLX dot would be basically finished, would be redundant?
Yeah.
We don't know yet, do we?
Yeah. We are doing a slow and staged rollout of this. And thanks Ina for looking through the code, and I would filter down by JavaScript or JSON. So we basically don't have, right. So the most important question for this is there are 2 important questions when it comes to this rollout. Number 1 is, when can I start using it? And the answer for this is, you can start using this last week Thursday ago, so 1 week ago. And then the next question is, when do I have to stop using hlx.live and hlx.page? And we don't know that yet, and we basically are only going to push the migration once we have significant parts of our traffic addressed, and we've been able to reach out to everyone who's still on helix.page and helix.live.
But you've still got libfranklin, for instance. It's all over the place.
Yeah, we're trying to get rid of it as much as we can. So yeah, so that's one of the ironies of Helix 5, is that we are trying to get rid of the Helix name. So
and the Franklin name.
And Franklin, yeah. So
yeah, the question is to when is Helix Live and Helix Page working? So when do you need to migrate?
Exactly.
But I expect it will be sometimes too.
It will be at some time, but we will reach out to you when that's the time. Right, and the way we typically do this. Yeah, Go ahead.
Sorry. Last question. Is there a kind of official documentation about the Helix 5?
There is a bit of documentation, but nothing super official yet, to be honest. So we're doing this slowly, and Discord is a great way to field those questions, because every time you field them, I'm thinking, I really need to write this down. And whenever, most of the time when I'm thinking it, I'm actually doing this, which is one of the nice things about using edge delivery services as a CMS, right? Because the edit button is just one click away.
It's always hard to do the documentation when you're doing something.
Yep. No, and it's much easier to write documentation when you actually get asked about it, right? When you don't have to anticipate the question, but when you get the question and when you think, I shouldn't have to repeat myself, and that's why I'm so happy that we have this exchange, and the written exchange that we have on Discord is just as valuable as the spoken one we have today. So especially as it allows me to do a bit more structured follow-up. Ina, I think I know why we can't find it, because we changed it. We enabled the configuration on the Helix on the Helix website. So, but I can find the change.
You can find the pull request, maybe.
Yeah, I'm going to look it up tomorrow.
No, but so this is why I was searching for aem-live on the Adobe repo.
The thing is, I put it in, and then we took it out again when we enabled So we for the Helix website obviously was one of our first guinea pigs for this. And it also was the first guinea pig of going over the point of no return, and that's what we already did with this, right? So that's what, and at that point, once you've enabled the configuration for this, and you can basically also delete your FS tab. You don't need it anymore, and that's what we did. But so.
Next time you can show us how to use the config API.
Yeah, I need Toby for that.
You need to invite him.
Yeah. Okay.
We try hard.
So, speaking, and thank you, Ina, for giving me this excellent segue. Speaking of next time.
Yes.
Dominik, when is next time, and what's going to be talked about?
Yes, I just updated the website. So we will do 2 Ask Me Anything or Ask Us Anything sessions the next 2 times. We are trying to get experts in, hopefully different experts for the 2 sessions. Lars and I are discussing as well about a lot of other topics. So there we are working on it to have really a good and nice series coming up.
Yep.
But if you have questions, if you have good topics, please send it to us, so maybe we can also prepare for the sessions. But yeah, please join. Be good next Tuesday and Thursday after, so in 2 weeks.
Great.
Yeah, I think the details on the repo list would be really interesting, because for enterprise customers, that is kind of a very critical requirement, because it's not about 1 or 2 or 3 websites. It's like 10, 15, 20, even 75 websites.
Yeah.
So theming and market based or brand based differentiation while having a common repo would be really useful.
Okay.
Good. Okay, yeah. So we will prepare a recording, then you can spread it all over the world. And
Perfect.
Just about the recording, thanks for taking this. Could you make sure this recording is high quality? It's just when you upload it in the YouTube, the quality is terrible sometimes.
Oh, you're thinking it's compressed too much.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I've noticed this. It's very pixelated.
Okay.
Okay.
I asked for it in Discord already.
Yeah, yeah, and I didn't really understood what you meant, if this was a comment on my recording setup or on the compression settings, so we have to look at it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I'm glad I had the second time.
Yeah. Always great to see you.